What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the HuntBetter Podcast, where our mission is to preserve the culture of hunting and the art of woodsmanship. Today, we're hanging out with a man who has made such an enormous impact on the sport of hunting and has really helped so many guys learn mature buck behavior and how to capitalize on those bucks in a variety of terrains and different habitats. And for me personally, Dan Infalt has elevated my love for the outdoors and just my overall success in the woods. And all of that stems from his desire and his devotion to pass on the wisdom he's acquired over the last few decades to those who are willing to learn and willing to grow. And so much of his content was and is free of charge. Things like the Hunting Beast Forum. There's so much content there that you could never read it all, but man, it's definitely worth spending a lot of time over there. Also, I'd love for you to support Dan and all that he's got going on because he's just done so much for me and for lots of other hunters over the years. Some of my favorite stuff Dan has put out over the years are his bedding DVDs. You got farm bedding, you got hill country bedding, swamp bedding, and several more. And if you're wanting to increase your success rate with mature bucks specifically, those will put you miles ahead of where you are currently, I promise. And Dan ain't paying me a dime to say any of that. I'm saying it because I have those DVDs and they totally changed my life. They changed my hunting success and it just went through the roof. The wisdom in those DVDs alone are just invaluable. So go get them and watch all of them at least 9 times. Okay. Last thing I'll say, Dan has always been someone who was willing to help little people like me get better. I remember reaching out to Dan years ago on the Hunting Beast Forum, and honestly, I thought it was a shot in the dark. I mean, he's Dan Infalt, right? A few hours later, I got a notification, and it was a message from Dan, and he took the time to give me an in-depth answer to my question, and I will just never forget that. So thanks again for being here. Let's go ahead and jump into the podcast. Dude, I've been waiting to say that intro for a long time, so I really appreciate you being here, man.
That's quite the intro. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Hey, so I was doing my research and I can't remember when I joined the Beast, probably maybe 2016 or 2017, something like that. But I didn't realize it went back all the way to 2010, man. I clicked on your post, it was like 41,000. And I went back to the first one and it said like February, I think 16th, 2010. And you were like, hey, I'm Dan. This is what the Beast is all about. I'm like, man, that's cool stuff. I mean, you had no idea it would do what it did?
It has had incredible growth. It actually is smaller now than what it was when it first started, probably because of Facebook, but it really blew up because there was nowhere else that was releasing the tactics we were releasing and stuff. It wasn't just me, as you alluded to. A lot of the people I was hanging with were some of the best killers in the country, and they all came on and stuff. And those old posts are some of the best ones. I mean, you've probably seen that post in the deer hunting forum portion of it, where it's got like all the best posts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like buying an encyclopedia on deer hunting.
Dude, it's so good. Okay. So, hey, the PDF version of that?
Yeah.
That's me, dude.
That's you.
I did it, man.
Okay. All right.
Dan, when I said I was going to do that, I was like, man, I should really make this thing a PDF because it'd be easier to read through. And I did. I told everybody on the site, I was like, I'm going to do a PDF version. And so I already put myself out there so I couldn't fail. And dude, it took just like 5 of them, 5 of the threads took me like 3 hours. And I was like, what have I done? What have I done? I was like, but I can't let everybody down. And so that was I'm
glad you did that. It was really, a boost. Yeah. I'm just really horrible with names and stuff and who's who. So I didn't even put the connection together, but yeah, that was really awesome that you did that.
Well, thanks, man. It made it easier on me. I was like, man, it might be easier on other people. And I remember you reached out to me after I got it done. It took me like a year to get it done for real. And you reached out and you're like, hey, you want me to, what is it called? Like pin it or something? And I was like, man, you do whatever you want. It's your thing. And I went back a few days later. I was like, that thing's posted right at the top, dude. It was like my life's achievement, man. So I appreciate it. But yeah, dude, the all-time best is, it really is. That's a good way of saying it. It's like an encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
Which one's your favorite on there? Like top 3?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I really don't. I get involved in all the conversations and stuff, and I really don't even keep track of them.
Yeah.
I still go back and bump old posts all the time that are really good ones. I go search through them. Like I'll go back years and years and years and search for stuff that, we haven't talked about in years, and find some little thing and bring it back to the top. And it's kind of cool to see all the old names on there and stuff.
One of my biggest takeaways from the Beast, like very early on, was the fact that all of these high level killers on here that, I mean, I knew of you, and some of these other guys now are some of my great friends. But I was like, man, nobody knows who these guys are, but all of them are obsessed with learning. Cause I remember sitting back going like, why are you guys asking each other questions? Like, you guys already know how to do this. And then, years and years went by, and I'm like, man, this is part of being a killer, is always be learning. Always. I mean, seriously, man, like the hunting beast, those early days for me, HuntBetter wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for that forming the foundation of my woodsmanship, of my like desire to learn more and being influenced by guys like you. So,
like if you think about some of those guys, like, Garrett Prawl, I mean, he's such a big icon now. And, he started on my site as Bow Hunter 15 because he was 15 years old when he joined.
That's great. Yeah, Garrett's a great friend of mine. That's excellent, man. What's something that you've learned in the last 5 years?
Geez, I'm always learning things, but the learning opportunities are smaller, more minute now. It's not huge things, right? So I learned little things about bedding and stuff. I think one of the biggest takeaways in the last 5 years would have been when I started doing camera studies on bedding. I don't like putting cameras on buck beds because it really influences them. They get scared to hell when you do things in their bedding areas, and they know those cameras are there. I don't know if they smell them or what, but you even put them way up in a tree and you get the deer walking and looking up at it.
Yeah.
They're, so I like to keep them out of the beds, but, for a short period, I got a whole bunch of cameras, from Exodus. And then I had some other people, get involved and use their cameras. And we put cameras in bedding areas for like a whole year and stuff, and really studied the deer. And, took some of my assumptions and some of the things that I've observed and really locked them in as this is reality, because now I've got factual information. And some of the things I learned was that these bucks have peak periods that they use their bedding areas. So there's like a 2-week window for most bedding areas that those deer, if it's a good bedding area, that deer's most likely there. And we already knew that multiple bucks use these bedding areas. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. They think they find a bedding area, it's one buck. It's not. If it's a good spot, all the big bucks use it. But you find out that with these cameras, we found out that there's some bedding areas that never hold anything older than 2 years old. They just don't have the ingredients or whatever for protection, and the mature bucks just don't bed there. But that 2-week window was really important, because that really locked in the timing of hunting that at the exact right time. So, one thing I noticed in some of these spots was for a 2-week period, of 14 days, my target buck might be in a bedding area, let's say 7 times, so 50% of the time. And the rest of the year, the odds are like 1 in 50.
Wow.
So hitting that timing correct. So that really set me on a path of really being more of the detective. You see more of that out of me now, where I really go into a bedding area and try to figure out exactly when that buck is there, based on the sign he leaves behind, and the things you find there. So that was one of the biggest key takeaways. Another thing was, I always thought that those mature bucks would lay in a bed for hours and hours, and they don't. They move quite frequently. They stay in the bedding area, but they'll get up and they'll eat a little bit and bed down a little bit further over. And it seems like there's key periods of time in the day when they do that. Like when the sun comes up and starts getting hot, something changes thermally and they move to a different bed. The thermals and the air currents change. They move.
Yeah.
And, midday when the sun's blaring bright down, they'll move to another bed that's more in the shade. And in the evening when the thermals start changing again, they move again before they get up.
Wow.
So they move constantly like that. And they might be in a bed for, I think some of the ones we've seen, some in these studies that were in a bed for 6 or 7 hours, and that was actually the extreme.
Wow.
Most of them would be in a bed for an hour or two, and sometimes you'd see 3 hours, but not long, and then they'd move. And if you had a camera over a bed, a lot of times you wouldn't see where they go. And I think a lot of people would assume they leave the area, but I don't think so. They just move over to a different bed in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
But those were some of the things I learned from that camera study, which I thought was pretty cool. I really don't recommend if somebody's trying to kill a deer that they put a camera in a bedding area, because it had a real negative impact on those bedding areas and on the deer.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ruined some of those areas, but I did it in the name of learning.
Yeah.
So for a hunter wise, you'd be way better off putting that camera, back 100 yards from the bed or 75 yards from the bed where you hunt, rather than in that bedding area, because they're a little more tolerant outside of that bedding area of things like that.
Yeah. I think it was maybe a video you released recently. Oh, maybe it was the top 12, which is a fantastic video, man. So was the Swamp Bible, man. That thing was so good. Okay. It was on one of those, and you said something I've never heard you say before, or at least I've never caught it. Something about this buck going in, and you could tell it was almost like checking that ridge to see where was the best wind at. Talk a little bit more about it. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, when I see, I'll track deer a lot in the snow.
Yeah.
And I'll follow their footprints, especially mature bucks. And that teaches me a lot. Mm. Now, where they bed in winter doesn't help me a lot in the fall, because the bedding changes. Usually, like when we're looking in spring, we're looking at the bedding areas that they were bedding in back in fall. But beyond that, what I'm talking about is following those deer tracks just to learn their behaviors and where they go and stuff. And what I started seeing was these bucks would, you're following it, and then, he's kind of got a beeline going. One of the interesting things was it wasn't going by any trees, and this is several bucks I did this with. Mm. But as soon as it gets near bedding, it starts wandering around a little more and starts going into bedding areas. And I know these bedding areas where I'm pulling these deer. I've been in them a million times.
Yeah.
I've got setups for them and stuff. And you watch this deer going in, and you're like, okay, he's going to bed down. And you watch him go right to an exact worn-in bed. Stand in that bed like he's going to lay down and not lay there. His footprints are moving around in that bed. You could tell he was standing there looking to lay down.
Yeah.
And then right out of that bed, over 50 yards to the next bed, stand in there for a little while, look around, and stand in the position he'd be in to bed with the wind to his back. But then not bed there, move to another bed, maybe in between those two, and then finally bed down.
Man, that's just fascinating.
That wasn't just once. That was time after time after time again.
Yeah.
And if you start following deer in snow, you'll see this. As long as you know how to recognize what a bed is, mm-hmm. You'll see them go into these beds and then move to another bed and then move to another bed and then finally bed. Yeah. And I believe what they're doing is checking wind currents, or they're checking for the safety of that bed. But obviously, if they've bedded there before, which they have if they know where that bed is and they went beeline right to it, mm-hmm. They're checking something that's specific to right now, which I think is wind.
Yeah.
It's probably the way the air currents are flowing, because I think a lot of their bedding is based on smell.
Yep.
On scenting danger. So that was very interesting for me.
Yeah, man. When you brought that up in one of those videos, or maybe it was on a live stream, I can't remember. Hey, you guys, if you guys aren't tuning into the Hunting Beast live streams on Tuesdays at 8, you should do it. They're great. Okay, let's jump to these questions here. We got Kurt says, "Hi Dan, my question for tonight is, what would be your favorite terrain feature that you find that gets you most excited?"
For me, it varies. So that's not a cop out; it's the truth. So I like marshes and swamps early season, and I like hill country and rut, and I like farm country in late season. And the reason for that is in swamps and marshes, it's real thick. I can get real close. I can get within that window of movement in early season, and really have a lot of success. Early season in marshes, if there's acorns, they're isolated. The deer aren't bedding in the acorns; they have to travel to them. And you can use those as like little food plots. There's not many people out there. Most people won't fight the mosquitoes and the bugs and the water to your balls crap, and go hunt these islands and stuff, and I'll go out there and I'll get pristine hunts. So now when rut comes along, it's hard to kill those deer in marshes and swamps when they just run in the cattails and chase and stuff. And, it's really hard to get movement in a spot where you want to kill them. But when you get into the hills, they pretty much stick to leeward sides where they can, get that wind over the top, smell from the bottom with the thermals. And, you can read it like a map and know right where to go. So hill country just works out really good for rut for me. And late season, deer will congregate around food. In an open type farm country, you can spot them deer from a ways. You can see the tracks in the snow or whatever. And you have to go a long distance of no deer once you get into that real late winter stuff. But you'll find them congregated, and the bucks will be on a really good pattern around food sources, which are pretty much locked down into spots in farm country.
So you're telling me you don't like big woods for late season? Man, that's what I'm stuck with here. I'm in South Carolina, and it's big woods, and it's real big. And man, late season is just. I mean, I seriously get to every December, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I need to start fishing in December. That's good stuff. Okay, let's see here. We got several. Rich, what's up, man? He says, "Hey Dan, would you ever hunt on the windward side of a ridge? If so, why?"
Yeah. Hi, Rich. Yes, I would hunt on the windward side because that's where the deer are going. I'm going to go wherever the deer are going when they leave their beds. There are cases too when they bed on the windward side. They don't just bed on leeward. Leeward is just most common. So they'll bed in hill country just like they do in farm country. They'll bed up against a thick area, on a transition. They'll bed, like they do in swamps. I mean, they'll find a little pothole somewhere and bed low. So they don't just bed on leeward sides. It's just that leeward is the most common bedding in hill country, right? But I don't necessarily hunt on the leeward side. I go and I find that bedding, or I guess where that bedding is, one of the two, depending on whether I've scouted it before. And I look for the trails coming out of that. And my goal is to get on the deer's exit trail from his bedding and be along that trail as close as I can possibly get without being seen, smelled, or heard. And that's where I'm setting up. And it doesn't matter to me where that is or what hill it's on, or if it's low, it's high, it's to the side. It's just a matter of that I'm on that exit trail as close as I can get. Sometimes it's 75 yards. Sometimes it's 200.
Yeah. Rich, man, if you don't have Dan's Hill Country DVD, just go get it. Like you won't regret it, and you'll watch it 14 times by the end of the week. So I'm telling you, it's really good. That was great. Benjamin, he says, Dan, have you ever hunted a property with plenty of biking trails on it? I know you talk about hunting overlooked property that hunters don't have much confidence in. I scouted a property last week that had a lot of hiking and biking trails, but very little hunter sign.
Yeah, I hunt stuff like that all the time. I think of that as more like suburban hunting. That's what I would call that. I've hunted a lot of conservancies that you apply for. There's one that I would do work for to hunt. You go cut invasive species, and the tree huggers will let you hunt for a day or two. Mm-hmm. And they would have hiking trails through the woods where they can, hug bunnies and stuff. And they'd stick to their trails and walk through there. Yeah. And it was interesting. There were some differences, but the differences you see also relate to all the other properties I hunt. It's just you see it more when it's more specific to heavily used trails. So one of the things I learned about that was that I could hunt spots more than once if I hunted right along the trail. Mm. I had a lot of reoccurring where the same buck would get out of the same bedding area and come through the same way over and over again, even if I hunted there, because they're so used to human scent on that trail. Yep. And so used to crossing that trail that I could hunt there. But if I would hunt 50 yards off that trail and they smelt where I was, they'd freak.
Yeah.
But they could come by and the day I walked up the tree, walk right across my scent trail and not even react. Mm-hmm. As long as my stand was right above the trail. And, there's also the plus, you get to wave at all the bunny huggers walking by.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this was maybe a month before season came in. I was out scouting this new little piece of public down from the house. It was like a lot for homes that never got developed. So it was just super thick and nasty, which was great. And I'm walking this road bed in. I cut this track and I keep walking and I'm like, you know what? That was kind of a bigger track and it looked kind of fresh. So I back up and all this stuff, I mean, it's like a rainforest to my left, just super thick and nasty, timber to my right. I look down at this track and I look over to where it's going into the woods and I'm like, man, okay, like maybe there's a bed, you know, that's the only reason something maybe would be right here. And I took 2, maybe 3 steps off of that trail and it bounded up and took off. It takes off and I'm like, my heart's jumping out of my chest. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was right there. I mean, it was 7 yards off the road, if that. And it ran off and I got myself together and I walk over and I see this bed. Like it was the most beautiful thing. And I sat down in the bed and I could see the top of my truck. And I was like, that thing was going to let me, it heard me park. It saw me walking by. And as long as I stayed where I was supposed to stay, he was totally fine with that. And I was like, how many bucks have I walked by my whole life? It blew my mind. That stuck with me for such a long time.
I got so many success stories over that exact same scenario. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of the absolute giants I shoot are usually right under everybody's noses and something that they would never dream of hunting.
Yeah. Let's see here. We got more coming in. Here's another one. Dan, how do you hunt public land that only appears to have bucks on it during the rut?
I go somewhere else. I scout a lot of properties and I don't hunt places that put the odds against me. I look for specific types of property and target those. Now, there are cases and times when I do have to hunt properties like the person asking the question is saying. And the reason would be that there's just a buck that's so big I have to go after him. Okay, otherwise, you know, if it's the same size bucks, I'm probably not hunting there. To me, getting bucks during the rut on travel corridors is just pure luck. It's what everybody does. Everybody sits funnels and hunts over big rubs and stuff like that. You have to have some sort of advantage on big bucks. And mature bucks do not run around in the rut like younger bucks, period. And I don't care what anybody says. They might run around 1 day or 2 days. They get a wild wind and they go chasing a doe off and make some mistakes. I don't want to put my whole hunting season on hopefully this buck makes his yearly mistake today. So if I were on a hunt a property like that, I would have to have a pretty good idea that buck is going to come across that property, whether it's rut or not, at a certain place, a point, a time. Every one of my hunts is, when I hunt, I have to believe in it. I have to believe that there is a reason. I have to know a reason why I'm putting a deer here today, which is why I usually shoot target deer, right? It's because I'm hunting a specific deer in a specific spot for a specific reason. Randomly hunting rub lines and stuff during the rut is not my cup of tea. I might go around the property, try to find a spot where that buck is bedding and coming onto the property. I might try to find a spot where that buck occasionally beds on the property, or does bed on that property and he's going to come move there and he has a bed to watch the does, which is common. Might only be there for 5 days out of the whole year. But if you know that's the case, you can pretty accurately guess which 5 days he's going to be in that area. So that's me. I have to have some specific reason. I can think of there's a buck I shot near my home that got called a Rome Legend buck. I'm sure a lot of people heard about that. That buck did not live on the property where I shot him. That buck, it lived on a private ranch where they have managed hunts. They charge $10,000 a member. And it was always over there. And you'd see it over there coming across the road. It would come over at night onto the public. For whatever reason, all the girls that lived on that ranch, he had a girlfriend on my side of the road. And I noticed that he was showing up for rut. I shot him in that little tiny window when he came over for the pre-rut. I shot him on October, Halloween night, because he made that mistake. But that's how I hunted that deer that only came over there during rut. When he bedded on my side, I was waiting for him. I knew where that spot was for my scouting and set up on it. But they don't run around in daylight like younger deer. If a deer is 6, 7 years old, one of those gigantic monsters, if he ran around during rut like other deer, he wouldn't have made it to that age. They just don't. They don't run. If they run around like that, I mean, I take a walk through the public land and I can't walk for 15 minutes without walking underneath somebody's stand or whistling at me going, hey, where are you going? You walk right, So if I can't do that, a buck can't do that.
Yeah.
They learn some hard lessons. I mean, every one of those big bucks that I shoot, when it's, 5 or older, I can't think of a one that we didn't pull projectiles out of.
Wow, dude.
They learn some hard lessons to get to that age.
Yeah. Yeah, the Rome legend. It's a great one, man. I got several more of these pictures when you reference them, man. I just love them. And there's some, you know what? Actually, I don't know about this one right here.
Yeah, that buck, that's an interesting buck. That buck, I was glassing during the summer. That was in kind of a farm country type setting. And he was living in this bottomland down in by a river in some really thick tangle. And I would see him come out just before dark out of there. And it was only a couple acres that he was living in, but it was surrounded by kind of heavy, high grass. And I was glassing him coming in and out of there. And I was after something a little bigger than that. And I decided to put Carol's cousin on that deer. And I set him up, put him in a tree right where that thing was coming out every day. And he ended up missing it and shooting the tree that it was standing next to.
Oh,
he missed it at like 15 yards, got excited. And a few days later, I saw it coming out of the same bedding area, but coming out a different way. It wouldn't go by where he was sitting. So I took a different friend and put him down there, and pretty much the same scenario. He was sitting down and tried to stand up when the buck walked out, and the buck spooked. And then we kind of lost track of it until like the end of October. And I saw it coming out of actually the same bedding area again, but an even different way, like a third way. And I set up on that. There wasn't much for trees, but I had one tree. And I got in this tree, and he came out, and there was a couple different trails he could walk down. And he ended up walking down one that went straight, absolutely straight underneath me. So it was head on all the way till he was straight down. And I drew the bow back, and I was following him, and I tried to make a shot straight down, between his shoulder blades. And I ticked a branch right in front of the broadhead, like 3 inches in front of the broadhead. And the arrow went end over end wonky and hit the deer an inch in from its tail in the butt, and penetrated about, an inch and a half just beyond the broadhead. And blood almost hit me in the tree. It just geysered out of this thing. And the deer took 2 hops, looked around, and fell over, and blood was still geysering up.
Hit that artery.
Cut that femoral artery. And I just got really lucky with that hit.
That's awesome, man. Chris says, do you have a scent control regimen, or do you mainly hunt the wind?
I would say my wife says I got a scent regimen, but it's not control. Yeah, I don't care one bit about scent control. I think it's magic pixie dust. I believe that there is nothing you can do to minimize your scent that will make any difference to a whitetail's nose.
Yep.
I think the only way to fool a whitetail is to understand that you can't fool his nose, and do what you have to do to keep him from ever smelling you. Or when he smells you, you're already moved on. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is, just look at my record. When you look at the number of deer I've shot, it changes dramatically when you go from the 2 and 3 year olds, which are still good bucks. I mean, you're talking Pope and Young bucks, but the 2 and 3 year olds, I'm shooting those sometimes in rut funnels, sometimes over food plots, the same kind of spots everybody else hunts. But when you get to the ones that are like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old that I've shot in, there's a pretty drastic difference between those deer and those younger ones. And the biggest difference you see, because I'll go through the painstaking process of processing, the analytics to it. I'll be like, in this age class, what happened, and so I break everything down. So like, I use what advances me, and I go away from what hurts me. And one thing I noticed when I analyze those hunts is the overall majority of mature bucks I've shot are the very first time I ever hunted a spot. Mm. And if it's not that, the next number down would be the very first time I hunted that spot that year.
Yeah.
Because then they come through to smell you. It's that moving around, that mobile that kills them. You can kill bucks, and a lot of guys get to be great killers. And you see this a lot. These guys that got pages and shows and stuff, they just keep killing buck after year after year, right? But look at the bucks they're shooting. They got to the point where they're killing 2 and 3 year olds, and they never advanced over that. Mm. Every now and then they get lucky and get a mature one. There's a reason I keep knocking down mature bucks, year after year. It's because I'm hunting for those bucks. It's a whole different animal than the other ones.
Yeah.
And, you got to get beyond scent control. Scent control just doesn't work. I don't think you can, even people will be like, well, if I can minimize it, they'll think I'm further away. Those deer's noses work so good, you can't fool it. And I like to tell the story of, when I watch TV and I watch YouTube, I hate watching hunting shows. I live hunting all the time. So for me, it's the opposite of probably everybody watching this. But what I like is crime shows. I like watching real crime. I mean, not fake made up ones. The stuff where you follow the detective when he's after a criminal and you're really seeing what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
I remember one show where they had they were after this like serial killer or whatever. And he's in a motel and they get a tip about it. So the FBI goes to this motel in Texas and they storm the door open and bust into this motel, and the guy's gone. The place is cleaned. It's been scrubbed down by the maid, and he's moved on. So they get the owner of the motel out there, and he says, well, yeah, that guy, he ran out of money. We kicked him out. He left 3 days ago, and he left on foot. He didn't have a car. So they call the maid in there, and this detective says, did you clean the room and stuff? Yeah, they cleaned the carpet, they cleaned the beds and stuff. But he looks in the garbage can, and the garbage can by the like lamp has a Coke can, a soda Coke can.
Yeah.
In the garbage can. And he points at the Coke can and he says to the maid, was that Coke can in that garbage can from that guy, or how did that get in there? And she says, yeah, that was his. Typically, I don't clean the garbage can if it's just a Coke can in there. I just left it in there and the next person could just add to it. I don't want to throw the garbage out for one Coke can. He says, okay, all right. They go get a dog. They bring this dog in there. They put gloves on. They pull this Coke can out of the garbage. And this is real.
Yeah.
They have the dog smell this can. The dog sniffs the can. They follow this dog on a leash out of this room. And it follows this guy's scent trail through this parking lot where tons of people are walking around, up a sidewalk, walking around people that are walking up and down the sidewalk. Remember, this was 3 days ago when this guy was here.
Wow.
And people this is in the city, people up and down the sidewalk, right? They go a few hundred yards up this sidewalk and the dog turns off and goes down this cut grass lawn down to this creek, crosses this creek and loses the trail a little bit, then finds it again on the other side of the creek.
Wow.
Goes right up this hill to a tent where the guy's sleeping and they bust him. You think you're fooling that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen tests done with scent control and stuff where people do everything the scent control people want, like Mythbusters did one. And the dogs found an exact same amount of time as they found the guy that, was all sweaty and nasty. Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes no difference. It's pixie dust.
Man, that's wild, dude. Off a Coke can.
Yeah.
Not even like a sock or something. Wow.
Most people have jobs. You get out of work at 3:00, you can run right out to the woods. And a lot of guys won't hunt because they don't have time to do their scent control stuff, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you, you look at my walls, I got over 40 bucks mounted. Out of those bucks, probably half of them were shot in my work clothes and my work boots that are all oily from the machine shop.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember there's a video, maybe it's on one of your DVDs, talking about like you're like something like carburetor fluid or something like that on you, like spraying down with DEET But yeah, I mean, like when I stopped focusing on scent control, I was like, man, my faith in actually playing the wind is growing. But anytime I tried to minimize it in any kind of way, I would be a lot more careless. I think it makes you a lot more careless in the woods. So, yeah.
And with how bad I smell, you wouldn't believe how many times I've dropped milkweed and bounced it off a deer walking downwind of me.
Mm.
Still, a lot of deer don't even care.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they don't smell me. I would say they're just not educated enough to be scared of it.
Right.
Every deer's got a different temperament to that kind of stuff.
Hey guys, wanted to take a quick break and invite you to join the community over at HuntBetter. If you've ever wanted to learn from some of the best hunters in the country, but you're tired of searching for content all the time, head over to HuntBetter.us and find all of our expert content in one place. We have original series like Breaking Down the Hunt, Master the Map, and hours of additional content and interviews. Don't let this season pass by without doing everything you can to make yourself better. We're happy to give all of our podcast listeners 30% off any membership using the code podcast30. So be sure to check out huntbetter.us, check out our memberships, use code podcast30, all caps, and start learning from the best. Hope to see you there. Let's get back to the show. Okay, we have Dave here. Dave, thanks for being here, man. He says, when getting into bedding ahead of returning deer in the morning, so when you get into the bedding area before the deer get back, what are your thoughts with red, green, white light headlamps? Does it matter? Would you want the light to be below your waist to limit detection?
I'll tell you, that's one of those things that changed for me over time. You being on the forum for so long, you've probably seen some of that. But back in the day, I used to really pride myself in being able to navigate in the dark with no lights. Your eyes adjust. Yeah. You see much better. If you're in the dark for 15 minutes, you start seeing really well. Mm-hmm. And I would go in and out of the woods in the dark fairly well without a light. But what the reasoning for that wasn't necessarily for the deer. A lot of it was I didn't want hunters to know where I was, but some of it was the deer too. But I had more than one occasion where I was mistaken for deer. And to the point where it got scary and dangerous. I had a guy, it was probably 45 minutes after dark. Way after dark. Draw on me as I walked underneath the tree.
Whoa, man.
I lit him up with a flashlight. I had a flashlight in my hand, but I didn't have it on. I was only using it as I needed it.
Would you hear him or something?
Yeah, I heard the arrow slide.
Oh my God.
It was dead silent. And I lit him up and he was at full draw.
Oh my gosh.
Since then, I walk through the woods lit up like a Christmas tree. And I'll tell you something. I don't know that lights really matter that much because walking through the woods, I can't tell you how many times I walk up to deer and they're walking beside you or something. You flash a light on them and they just kind of look at you. Yep. And if they do take off, they don't run hard. They don't spook hard. There's something about that nighttime. It doesn't seem to bother them. Mm-hmm. I've lit them up as I'm walking by and said, holy crap, that's a good buck. And they just stare at you and you just keep walking.
Yep.
But when they see you in the daytime, they seem to freak more. I don't think those lights matter. I really don't. If you feel more comfortable with red light, use red light. If you feel more comfortable with green, use green. I kind of feel like to some degree with how many people are out there hunting nowadays, and nowadays is kind of a different crowd. Mm. You've got more of an educated hunter on public land. It used to be that the hunters on public land didn't know what they were doing. And I didn't want those people that didn't know what they were doing to see where I was at because it would give them ideas. Nowadays, I'd kind of rather people see where I'm at because a more educated hunter might be headed to that spot or that area. Yeah. He might cut me off. And if he knows I'm in there, he's going to go somewhere else. I doubt that I'm hunting in spots where very many people are going, but they might be going close enough to do damage to me.
Yeah.
So I'd rather they knew where I went. So if they see the light or something, maybe they'll stay away.
I can't believe you heard that arrow. That's nuts, man.
Yeah. It was scary. It was enough to make me wear lights.
Yeah. I'd have had dirty pants walking out of there. Evan, what's up, dude? Evan says, are you as excited with beans near bedding versus corn and acorns in the early season? Lots of cattail marsh around here and still observing differences when the crops rotate.
Yeah, I'm excited about it all. I really don't focus on food much. If I do, it's usually acorns. But you focus on corn a little too and beans. Yeah. But really the focus is on the bedding. I don't really care what they're eating. But a lot of the bedding does rotate around food. So if you got bucks bedding on the point of an island that has oaks on it, that bed is probably going to be used when there's oaks on that island that are dropping acorns. So that'll be on my mind. Sometimes you'll find beds that are in a specific spot to be used for corn, but when there's no corn there, they're not being used. And that's the thing you'll see with people is they'll go scout and they'll find some bedding area that's just tore up. And they'll be like, oh man, this is the spot. I'm going to hunt her this fall. And then they come in the fall and they're like, there's no sign. There's no, rubs. There's no nothing. And they're like, I don't know what I saw in spring, but something changed. And they move on. Then the next year they're going through there, another year later, and there's a sign again. They're like, holy crap. And then they give it another try the next year and they're like, it's a dud again. Well, a lot of those places every other year, when there's corn, when there's acorns, are good spots, and you got to get good at reading that and understanding. That's part of that detective work with the bedding. You got to be able to understand, why is this bedding here? What is it for? What reasoning? So when I look at a property, the first thing I do is I walk those transitions. I look at the points. I look at the spots where I know deer bed, the transitions, the edges, the points, the little islands, right? I look at those spots. I find the beds. And then I think about, well, what's the food source? What's the deer doing? Why is he here? Is he here because of does? Is he here because of acorns? Is he here because of corn? So that's it. Food, like the does and everything else, is an afterthought. The first thing I need to know is, where's that buck bedding? And for your audience that doesn't understand why I'm saying that, I mean, most of these mature bucks, when I shoot them, they're getting out of a bed, 75 to 100 yards from me, and I'm shooting them at closing time. You're any further than that, you ain't shooting them. You ain't seeing them in daylight. So in order to kill these things in daylight, you have to be close to that bed. So the reason I've got all this success is because I'm focusing on that bedding and then looking back at the other stuff. And I can't tell you how many people, I mean, the majority of people I talk to, first questions out of their mouth is food. And food is an afterthought. Some of these bedding areas, I've never put my finger on what they're eating. I have no idea why they're there. I just know the timing and know the direction of travel. The better ones, sometimes I do know what they're doing. You know what I mean? But some of them I don't. Because a lot of times these deer are just eating green plants. They're eating stinging nettles. Stinging nettles is a huge food source for deer. Well, it's kind of hard to find a patch of stinging nettles and know that your buck is going in there and eating it, right? But if you got a bedding area, you got a timing when he's there, you got a direction to travel, the rest don't matter. So that's what you got to focus on, is the bedding first.
Yeah. Like for me, I struggle with, and I'm hunting big woods all year long, and finding food. I mean, it's exactly what you said. Just point somewhere and there's food. I mean, if you don't know where the bedding is, I don't even know how you wouldn't drive yourself crazy in the big woods if you're just looking for food first. But that's really good stuff. Let's see here. Okay. Benjamin says, when hunting public land, do you find yourself hunting close to public land property lines? The interiors of public land where I live seems to get hit hard.
Yeah. A lot of times I am along property lines. A lot of times I'm not. I mean, but property lines come into play a lot. Because a lot of times I'll hunt near a road. I'm trying to find spots where people don't go, and they do spread out through the middle pretty heavily. So finding those edges and corners and stuff where people ignore is what I'm focusing on. Sometimes it is in the middle of a swamp. Sometimes it's on the edge, but anywhere where I'm legal to hunt, I'm good. So it could be anywhere in there. But yes, a probably higher number than the other way are somewhat near land borders.
And do you think it's because other people are scared to get that close or something?
I do not think that. I think it's just because it's missed. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, man, we have so many here. I'm gonna try to hit them, you guys. Evan says, this is a great one. What is your main indicator from scouting besides a visual that a mature buck lives on the property and that property is even worth hunting?
I guess the biggest one for me is the height of rubs.
Yeah.
The height to the center of the bared part. What I mean by bared part is you're not looking at the tine where the tines are poking into the tree because they'll jam their head way up there, right?
Mm.
But you look at where the bases of the antler, right coming out of the head, rub the tree. They'll rub the bark right off, right?
Yeah.
The center of that portion that has the bark rubbed right off, the height of that. What I find is when you get that below my knee, like halfway from my knee to my ankle, that's usually a 1.5 year old buck.
Hmm.
When I get it to my knee and a little bit higher, it's usually 2.5. I get it around my waist. That's usually where you're starting to look and this could be a 3-year-old. And mature bucks, that center is generally like above your waist, gut, chest height kind of thing. Then you're looking at a deer of an older class. And what it is the height of the deer and their structure. They rub higher. Mm-hmm. But I do see 2-year-olds will rub really big trees, but that rub will be lower. So, I mean, everybody wants to believe diameter is everything to do with it, but it's not.
Yeah.
Height has a lot more to do with it than diameter. I mean, you got to have a little common sense too. You got to look if it's on a hill, if the deer is standing up on something. You got to look at like if it's a soft tree, a deer could bend over and pull down, and he's rubbing, as the tree's bent. But a rigid tree, when it rubs up high like that, that's something to really pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay. Attila, that's a cool name. He says, Dan, I struggle gauging whether the faint trails downwind of doe bedding and food sources that I find while scouting are significant enough to set up on, and how far downwind I should be looking. Any insights? Also, what is the average J-hook distance you see?
Oh, good questions. Good. With hard answers. So let's start with the first one, with the doe bedding. One thing I'll say is when bucks check doe bedding, the common statement is that they travel to the downwind side. And I would say the majority of the time they do. But it's just barely the majority. It's not always. A lot of times they'll take the upwind side too. Because a lot of the time what they do is they just check the scent trails of the does going into the bedding, smell the cross trails. Now, if you got those does coming in from the downwind side to bed in there, hey, you're golden, right? But I would look for sign on both sides. And as far as those faint trails going around that doe bedding, the only way I'd have any interest in that is if there's rubs on them, because any buck around does that's of significance is going to be rubbing trees. So those trails better have some rubs on it. They don't have to be fresh. They can be last year's rubs that are scarred over, or the year before that. There could be historical rubs there. Because if you're hitting the timing right, he might not have rubbed yet, but he's coming. You know what I mean? If you're hitting that timing right. So I'm not sitting there if it's just a trail. Like I said, I have to have a reason to be there.
Yeah. Was it the Roman legend buck was it a historical rub line you were looking for him to hit?
Yes.
Yeah.
He had a rub line that came out of his bedding area, and had those real high rubs. And when that would get hit, I knew he was bedding there. And I was waiting for that to get hit before I go anywhere near getting my scent near that bedding area. And because I believe your scent stays there for 15 to 30 days.
Yeah.
It'll linger in there. Deer will know somebody's been in there. And that deer probably ain't going to bed in there, or he's going to move if he comes in there and smells that you've been there. So I stay away from there until it's kill day. So I'm looking at that rub line from a distance, right?
Yeah.
That deer, I learned that because I started hearing and seeing a lot about him the year before. Everybody was talking about him the year before I killed him. And I figured out where he was bedding. That bedding area was nothing new to me. I had already killed I think 3 or 4 pretty good bucks out of that bedding area. And I knew how that rub line worked and everything else. And I knew that buck was living on that preserve or that ranch. And people started talking about they'd seen him on the public land side shining and stuff. A few different people said that. So I went back there, and there was rub lines coming up across the road going in there, and scrapes and stuff that were really big from a big animal, obviously him. And then I went back and checked that rub line. It was open. But the year before, I actually went in there and I was going to hunt them right where I hunted them the day I killed them. But as I was getting in there, there's a little doe bedding area just before you get there. And a doe jumped up. And then he jumped up with the doe and I split them. The doe ran one way and he ran the other. So I set up right there. This is the year before I killed him. Mm. And he came back, but he circled downwind like one would expect. And I kept thinking, if he comes in, he's probably going to come downwind. He's probably going to be in that first transition. I should be right there. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, no, he's going to go right to where that doe was last. And he did that downwind transition and smelled me, blew, took off. And then I didn't see him till the next year. And then when that rub line opened up, I went in for the killed him the first day I was hunting them. And I had to walk under about 8 or 10 people to get there. And it wasn't far from the road because all the sign and because everybody was seeing it and everybody was talking about it. There was just people everywhere. I think there was 20 some trucks in the parking lot the day I shot that buck.
Golly, man. Do you walk under people now and instead of not knowing who you are, they're like, hey, Dan?
Yeah.
I figured.
It gets a little weird.
Yeah, I know. Like middle of nowhere and hey, Dan. Okay, let's see here. Scott Buckley says, hey, Dan. Scott Buckley from Iowa said hello. Great content tonight. Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, Scott.
So let's see here. Evan says, Dan, I also have to tell you that your shed ordering story from Menards had me laughing for quite a while.
I'd be happy to know the shed still isn't done.
That's awesome. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Nick says, Dan, what are some correlations between deer and bear hunting that has improved you as a hunter? That's a great question.
Geez, I don't know if there's any correlations that improve me as a hunter. But there are correlations. I mean, those bears, I get them bedding on those points going into the swamps just like deer.
Really?
Yeah, they use their noses just like deer. So they bed in spots where they can smell danger and stuff. And I set up kind of the same way I do for deer, except for I'm using bait. So I look for those points and stuff, and that's helped me out a lot. So it's more I can use deer correlation to get me on bears than I'm learning something from the bears for the deer. Probably because I have a bigger background in the deer. You only get to hunt bears every couple of years, right?
Let's see here. Kurt says, in regards to playing the wind, how do you predict the wind direction? Many times using a weather app, it's a different direction than predicted due to terrain features. Dropping milkweed from the ground doesn't give a good indication of direction compared to being up in a tree. So how do you play the best scenario to beat the wind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'll look at the weather. I'll have a plan. I mean, hopefully I got a solid spot where the wind I have is, true enough that I know it'll be good. But a lot of times I got to check it as I'm going in. Things change. I mean, a lot of places, wind is not doing what's predicted. And what it'll do is the way it hits trees, the way it hits thermals and stuff will change direction in a spot. So it ain't necessarily that the wind direction is being predicted wrong. It's more that it's just different where you're going to hunt. So I'm checking it constantly. It can change in a tree. I mean, probably more often than not, it don't. But sometimes you can get up and the wind's doing something a little different up there, or there's thermals and stuff. And I let milkweed dictate a lot of what I do. I just make sure it's not going where it's going to hurt me. When I was younger, I used to say if I got in there and the wind was doing something bad, like it was, it was off a little bit, that I'd back out and come back a different day. Now I pretty much just hunt it, because if I get in there and my wind is wrong and I got my scent in there, I've already hunted it. Mm-hmm. I've already screwed it up. So I'll take my chances. And a lot of times I can beat them if I get up in a tree. Mm-hmm. I can remember one spot in hill country where I was after a mature 8-pointer, a big old 8-pointer. And I had hopped around trying to find him. And there was one last spot where I figured he might be bedding on this hillside where it's real thick. And a friend of mine had got some camera pictures of him in there in daylight. So I thought I'd focus on that. And there was 2 bedding areas that were adjacent to each other. And one of them I thought held that buck, and the other one held a lot of does. And I thought that buck in rut would travel from the one bedding area to the other one because it was only a couple 100 yards up this ridge. The trouble was the ridge was leeward, and the only way to hunt it was from above. And the wind blew right through there, but I could get between the bedding areas without them winding me. So I got in there, and there's one little opening, and it was the spot you had to hunt because it was so thick and overgrown with like buckthorn and crap, right? But there's one little opening in there, and there's a tree I could get in. And the guy that had the camera pictures had a stand in the tree. But if I got in that stand and I dropped milkweed, they would go right to the deer trail. They dropped right to it. And that guy told me he couldn't hunt there because those deer would wind him. It just wasn't working out, but the stand was still in the tree. I looked at that, and then I ended up going up that tree about 10 more feet or so and getting above the tree line. And my wind blew straight up over the top of everything. So I hunted it, with a stand above a stand, and killed that buck that night.
Wow.
Came through. He never knew I was there. The doe came through first. So even if he stumbled into the opening, he wouldn't have done that if that doe winded me. And she came through without knowing I was there. And then he came in and got the axe.
Yeah.
But literally 6 feet lower in that tree, he smells me. 6 feet higher, he don't.
That's crazy. Yeah. What do you think? What was the height of the first one and height of yours?
I think the first one was probably up about 18.
Wow.
18 feet. I probably went up about 25, which is pretty high for me. 25, maybe a little higher than that, maybe closer to 30.
Yeah.
Which is really high for me. I don't like steep angles.
Yeah.
But I did what I had to do for that scenario.
Wow. And 18's that's not super low either.
No, it's not.
Wow.
But there was trees higher than what I was sitting in the tree. When I went up higher in that tree, it was one of the bigger trees around there. It was all like buckthorn and crap. It got me to a point where I was skylit up in the sky above all those trees. And then my wind went straight over the top of everything.
Yeah.
Now, if it was calmer too, I'm sure I would have dropped right in there too.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty good. That's good stuff. Okay. Sean says, Dan, is there anything that you've learned or started doing differently recently over the last year that had either led to success or helped you improve your hunting?
Geez, I think the main thing I'm doing differently is I'm spending a little more time on myself. I think if you go back a few years, I was spending a lot of time scouting people's properties to earn more money and to get ahead so that I could have more money to hunt with and stuff. And what I'm doing differently now is I'm spending more time scouting for myself, because what I find is I can know 1,000 different bedding areas. It's the new one that hasn't been hunted yet where I find some mature buck that I kill these giants on. So I see a direct correlation with how much I scout to how much success I have. And then the years I don't get enough scouting in, I don't have as much success as the years that I do get that scouting in. I mean, last year was a prime example. I scouted my ass off, all spring, winter, and into the summer even a little bit, and even tweaked some spots. And just one of the spots I found was, I had shot a deer in the spine the year before and not killed it. And I liked the spot, but I noticed from the tree, it was a spot I kind of found going in blind, right? I noticed from the tree, I was in a thick buckthorn thicket where there's very few trees. I was a little leery about going further because I didn't know what I was going to get into. So I set up in this buckthorn. I ended up wounding that deer, and I went in there another time and had more bucks come out. But I kept seeing the bucks up ahead of me and knowing where they were bedding. I felt like I needed to get closer. So in the off season, which I do quite often, if I see a deer, shoot a deer, or any of that, I want to know where it came from. So I go in there, I scout further in, right? So I did that with Eric, and we found a box elder tree in there that was closer, and picked out that tree, and then moved out of there. And then when I came back in the fall, I went in there and I shot a 170-inch buck on public there. It's just because I scouted that spot, found a new spot. Now, that's not to say, that might be the first spot you find, but I scout 100 spots and you go out there and you find somebody found one of them, somebody, one of the areas flooded, one of the areas, the DNR decided to log, there's all kinds of crap happens.
Yeah.
And then you get in one of them, one or two don't work out, right? Obviously. But then you just stumble into one of them and it works. But again, that relates right back to when we shoot these giant bucks, it's almost always on a new spot in the first sit. Now, if I go back to that spot, I'll probably kill 2 and 3 year olds over and over again. But it takes time for that buck to learn an area. He's lived in there that buck was probably, 6 or 7 years old. It was a giant old buck, right? In that time frame, he learned all the areas people are hunting in there. He learned all the spots, right? Even if you're in there once or twice, you got to remember that your scent is there for 15 to 30 days after you've been there. If you hunt that spot twice, a month apart, your scent is basically there the whole season, the whole hunting season.
Yeah, wow.
So once you get that in your head and you start understanding, you can't beat a deer's nose. It makes perfect sense why I'm shooting these things in the first spots I'm sitting. Or, I think they remember those spots. They avoid them. I mean, you think about Dave's farm. We hunted there for 30 some years. You'd see these deer, the 2 and 3 year olds. We had the spots down. We had the stands for them in the positions they needed to be. And you feel like you have every spot covered in there. You have 25 stands and 70 acres that's basically open. I mean, you basically got to stand on almost every tree, right? Mm-hmm. But whenever you'd get a deer on the property that would make it to the age of like 5 years old, you'd watch them things come through the property and never go by a freaking tree stand. That monster that Dave ended up shooting, the last buck he got, that 170-inch giant 10-pointer he got, that deer was 7.5 years old, and we hunted him from when he was like 4 on. And you just see that buck constantly, just off to the side. He'd never be under a tree. It'd be like that deer knows where his stands are. And you'd watch him. You'd see him come out from one stand and watch him look up to see if you're in a tree stand. Wow. And it's like, he's never saw us in that tree stand. He knows where that stand is. And you hunt those stands 2 or 3 times in an entire year. And those deer get to be 5, 6 years old. They know where those spots are. So if you're hunting a spot year after year, killing, nice bucks out of it, and you're thinking one of these days I'm going to get a monster, maybe you do. Maybe you get lucky. But you're educating that deer, you're going to kill giants by hunting in new spots, because those are spots that haven't been hunted in years. And in those other spots where you've killed one, if you leave them alone long enough, they will get good again for giants. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you're content shooting 2 and 3 year olds, I mean, great. I mean, those are really nice bucks. I mean, I have a hard time passing a 130-inch 2-year-old with the right frame, or on public, mm-hmm. or a 140 or 150-inch 3-year-old. I don't want to pass them, but I don't want to put myself out of the game for shooting the monsters.
Yeah,
you gotta hunt for them every day, and you gotta have a discipline of that. Because if you let your guard down and say, well, I know I can go over to that tree and shoot a 2 or 3 year old. Well, you just put that day, you only get so many hunts a year. If you hunt 20 times in a year, now you only got 19 for that big buck. If you put one day and you're going to go in after the 3 year old. And then if you tag it, you really got no chance at a big one. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I won't shoot that buck if he walks underneath me. But what I am saying is I'm not putting myself in a position where I've got no opportunity to shoot a giant.
Yeah. Man, I've never thought, when you said that earlier about you could sit at a spot twice a year, a month apart. And like for me, that's something I've adopted. I got it from you. I got it from several other guys. But you're still, that's almost all season that your scent is lingering. I've never thought about that, man. That's such a great point. Also, I remember reaching out to you. This was years ago. I probably sent you a message on the Beast and was like, hey, what do I do if I want to kill like 2 or 3 year olds pretty consistently? This is like my first year or two on the Beast. And you were like, act like you're hunting mature bucks. I was like, oh, okay. Like put yourself in the game. And if one of those comes through, kill it, but put yourself in the game. And like, that stuck with me, man. Like, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Roger that. Okay. Let's see here. Attila, I'm glad you brought that back up, man. We kind of skimmed over that one. He said, what's the average distance you're seeing bucks J-hooking into the bed, or is it entirely wind speed? Sorry, man.
I forgot about that.
Me too.
It was the second part of that question. Yeah. The J-hook in is really a wide open term. So basically what I'm seeing is when a mature buck goes into a bedding area, the majority of the time they want to go downwind of that bedding area and smell it. So when they come in on a crosswind or an angle, which is most of the time they don't come from they weren't out feeding somewhere straight, downwind, right? So they come in from an angle. When they get below, they're going to go either past downwind of it so that they smell it and then circle back in. They're going to walk right past and come back, or they're going to go right straight below it and go straight into the wind, straight to the bed, and then turn around and watch your back trail. But the distance varies, which is why you're not going to find a trail for that usually. Where you will find a trail for that is like in cattails or something where it's really thick cover and they can't just walk anywhere. But if you're in big woods like you are, or you're, in hill country, it's going to vary. It's not going to be the same all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it pretty hard to shoot them in the morning, by trying to predict that J hook.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's more about in the morning being a little further back when they're still on a trail coming towards bedding. Not to mention, the majority of the time when bucks come back to bedding in the morning, they come in before daylight.
Mm.
And then you're sitting there in a tree. You can't get out of the tree. They detect you before they get to the bed. It just gets crazy. The exception is during the rut. They start moving more in daylight in the mornings. But still, what I see is different than what people preach. People always say, oh, bucks move late into the day and mornings and go back to bedding. So you can hunt them in the mornings, in rut. But I don't think that's really entirely true. What I see is those bucks run around all night chasing these does and stuff. Before daylight, they go back and they bed. They're in those bedding areas before daylight. But they get back up at like 8-ish, 9-ish, which is why you see a peak movement at 8, 9, 11 sometimes, right? Later in the day,
Mm-hmm.
They're getting back up, and now they're going to go check on those does that they know by now are bedded.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But they're still bedding in the morning before daylight. The difference is they'll get up and they'll move. So you could be in a bedding area and you can have them come back, or go from one bedding area to another bedding area because they're moving constantly during the rut. They're not staying in one bedding area or whatever. But hunting bedding areas in the morning is a lot harder of a tactic than hunting them in the evening. And if you've got a really good bedding area that you could hunt either evening or morning, 100% hunt it on the evening. Because the morning is kind of half-assed luck. But in the evenings, if that buck is home, most of the time when I'm on the exit trail, I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to have my opportunity.
Mm-hmm. We'll spend a few more minutes with questions here. David, thanks for being here, man. He says, if pre-fall scouting, you find fresh scrapes coming out of bedding. Oh, I love this topic. Would you push in without knowing the bedding, or wait until what he says? Wait until spring to understand the bedding and how far you can push in.
You kill it when it's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always aggressive. That deer might not even be alive next year.
Mm.
The pattern might change. The food source that he's bedding for might change. Some hunter might stumble in there. You find hot sign, you hunt it. I even go to the degree of every time I go to a spot, I might have a destination in mind where I think I can kill a big buck. Halfway there, I run into a hot sign coming out of a swamp. I'm hunting it. I don't get to my destination 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Hot sign beats everything.
Yeah.
You're taking a guess when you're hunting bedding areas. You're going to a destination that buck's going to be home. He's living there right around now when you find hot sign.
Mm-hmm.
You find hot scrape stuff. Now, the difference is, you find a scrape out in the woods and you say, I don't know, he's probably bedding over there. Yeah. You got to have at least an idea what bedding is. That scrape is or scrape line's coming out of a point of woods going into cattails or going into dogwood or something. Yeah, pretty good chance he's coming out of bedding there. Yeah. It's going through a woods or something. You at least relate it to bedding is what I'm trying to get the point across. Yeah.
I was on the live stream this past Tuesday and I asked the question about the bedding scrapes, man. And I think in fact, I know you talk about them different than, or what's the best way to say it? You're talking about a different scrape than what other people are calling like a primary scrape. And I think that's so important, man. Like people are like, oh, scrapes around bedding. And it's like, yes, but not necessarily. We talk about bedding scrapes a little bit.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that most scrapes are done at night. kind of like rubs. I mean, if you look at deer sign in general, keep in mind that when you're talking a mature buck and you're talking public land, more than 95% of the time that deer is moving, it's at night. You get less than a 5% window of daylight movement. Those things are not wandering around in daylight. So when you find sign, 95% or more of the time, it's made at night. So, the relationship to that sign to bedding is real important to me. Now, when he's talking about bedding scrapes, a lot of guys will say that, anything they find that's used, the majority of the year, or something that's primary and multiple bucks use it and blah, blah, blah. And they'll think it's because it's an intersection or whatever. And sometimes that's true, but that's still nighttime bedding or nighttime scrapes. Usually you get peak rut, you'll get the 2 and 3 year olds running around. That's like I said, people can get consistent about killing them using those type of tactics. But what I found was that when you find an area that can hold multiple bucks, like 2 bedding areas that are really close to each other, and at the intersection of the trail coming out of each of them, where they stage, which is usually the same direction because they're going to head to the same area if they're bedding in there, right? Where they intersect, they have a scrape, and that scrape will be used all year, or at least when the bucks are there, and it has nothing to do with those. It has everything to do with communicating with the other buck. So that scrape will be, 75, 100 yards from the bedding. And a lot of the time, those are used in September, right when they're out of velvet and stuff. And there's not does using, there's bucks coming in and out of these bedding areas using those, right? So several of my very biggest bucks came from those exact type of scrapes. So there's one buck that I shot, a really wide 11-pointer. So that buck, that was just a giant mutant. That buck, I found him in, I think it was early August. I watched him coming in and out of bedding, and a smaller buck coming in and out of bedding, and they kept working the scrape. Even in August, they were working that scrape, even in full velvet. And I shot that buck on opening day on that scrape as he came into work it right when it stopped raining at about 1 p.m. So then there was the buck that got dubbed the 400-pound slop. That buck, I was watching from a parking lot. He was coming out of bedding, and there's a 140-inch 10-pointer that would come out too. And they both worked that a similar scrape in a different spot that was 100 yards from the 2 different bedding areas. I shot that one on that scrape. And there was several other ones. But the point of it is that a very large number of my very biggest bull kills came in very early season on that exact scenario with that scrape. Now, the problem with that is they're not very easy to find. Every few years you run into one, and I scout a lot.
Yeah.
But when you do, recognize it, because that could be a really killer setup.
Yeah. I remember you saying on Tuesday that they're actually not very big.
Yeah, they're often not. Sometimes they're hardly scraped at all. You kind of got to look for them, but you'll see the licking branch. You'll see where they're scraped in the ground, but they won't be the size of a car hood. They won't, like a rut scrape. They're not out there trying to attract those. They're just letting that other buck know what's going on. They're like, hey, this is my spot,
Yeah.
That's how they communicate.
Bedding scrapes, man. I love it. Okay. So we're going to do one more question here. Matthew, I don't think we've called you out yet. Thanks for being here, Matt. He says, hey, Dan, in Hill Country, what is good early season hunting areas?
Hey, Matt. Kind of the same thing. I'm looking at the bedding and I'm trying to figure out how they're coming out of there. So, early season, I'm probably, looking at leeward hills. I'm looking at, points, benches, things, that are adjacent to food, to water. I'm looking at the trails that come out of there, trying to cut them off. I might hop from bench to bench, trying to get in between where these deer move. What I do in like hill country is, for early season is I'll map the hill country. So, I'll take a look at a topo map right? And I'll take I'll look at what the wind is. Say it's like a northeast wind. I'll take the southwest side of each hill, and I'll mark a line on it. And I'll look at where all the leeward stuff is. And I'll say the majority of the deer that are on that property should be bedded on those ridges. And I just took that map and I made it tiny. There's very little spots now those deer can be. And then within those spots, I'll look and I'll try to find the best looking spot in there. If I haven't scouted it yet, which is a lot of the case, a lot of times when I'm hunting hill country is road trips. So I'll find the best looking terrain on the map. I'll mark it. I'll mark several of those. And I'll go in and I'll hunt that. And if that don't work out, I'll go to the next one. And I'll go to the next one. And if I've gone in there and scouted, I already know where those are and know where those setups are. But the same thing with scouting. I'll be looking at, okay, I'll walk that top third of the ridge around the whole property. And I'll find the bedding, and then I'll know what winds basically would be the best for that bedding. And that's when I'll look at hunting it if I were to pre-scout it. Now, one of the best scenarios I found in hill country as far as holding giant bucks is when you have a low axis and you have high ridges right beside where you park, and you got to walk way back. You follow the trail in. Nobody walks up those ridges and hunts right alongside the road way up in the steep ridges. And like clockwork, on just about every one of those scenarios, you find some giant buck laying up there watching that parking lot.
Wow. Yeah. So if you sat in his bed, you could see the whole parking lot.
Yeah. And that's the overlooked spot for hill country. That's just a classic. And I really rarely find any hunter sign in those types of scenarios. Nobody is hunting right above their car up in those spots. And the kicker of it is, on the times that I've hunted those and gotten on the really big bucks, just about every one of them, I have to walk way out in there, way up the ridge and around in a circle and come back and get them going down that ridge from that spot. But I can't just go up there and set up. He's watching you.
Yeah.
You got to go in like every other hunter does. And you got to circle back and sneak back close to him.
Yeah. And how cool is that too, knowing like you're walking through and you're like, I know he's looking at me.
That's right.
That's cool, man.
A lot of those deer do. A lot of deer set up to watch hunters. People don't get that. That's why they like right next to parking lots and stuff. They like to see their enemy, get close to them.
Yeah.
But, that's the whole key to hunting these giants is really, if you think about it, they avoid places they smell people. It's that simple, right? Look at the map. Where do people not go? And still has deer habitat. Nobody's going up that ridge up there, right?
Yeah.
That's why, you get across a river, you do things that's out of the ordinary, get to places where people don't go, that you're getting on better bucks. That's plain and simple. You got to use your noggin.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a game of war. You think about, if you were in there with your brain and these hunters were hunting the way they are, but they were after you, where would you hide? That's probably where your buck is.
Hey, for more expert hunting content just like this, be sure to visit us over at huntbetter.us. Join the HuntBetter community. Remember to hunt harder, hunt smarter. We'll see you.